Alright, quiet, settle it down. Professor Squints is in the building. In today's class, we will be covering Algeth'ar Academy. Please open your textbooks up to page 69 and begin at paragraph 2 as we go over everything you need to know in order to not brick your keys. Now, let's begin. When entering the dungeon, you'll have a choice between one of the 5 Dragonflight buffs. Black is crit, bronze is haste, blue is mastery, red is verse, and green is healing taken increased. First off, we have the aggravated skitterflies. They are going to do increased physical damage, and they will charge to an enemy, inflicting damage randomly. Next up is the big lasher known as the vile lasher. They will spawn green swirlies on the ground that you do not want to stand in if you do not want to die. And for the baby lashers, just AoE them down. Now for our first boss, the Overgrown Ancient. His first ability, Germinate, will spawn 4 brown swirlies underneath your feet. You will have to step out of these swirlies every time they spawn, leaving behind a lasher that is rooted in the ground. For this mechanic, the group is going to want to stack up on your tank and move clockwise around the boss as a group, dropping your swirlies. This is to group up the lashers so that they can be cleaved down before Burst Forth happens at 100 energy. Burst Forth is going to make all of those lashers pop out of the ground and start dealing damage. Make sure to AoE these lashers down as quickly as possible, even before they come out due to Burst Forth. The next major ability, Branch Out, is going to apply a bleed to everybody in the party and put a giant brown swirly on the ground that you'll have to dodge. When the swirly goes off, it's going to leave out a treant. DPS, hop on the treant and kill it as quickly as possible and interrupt its healing touch. When the treant dies, it's going to leave behind a green swirly that everybody in the group is going to have to stand in order to remove that bleed. Failing to do so will keep the bleed on you. And this bleed does stack, so make sure to stack in the green swirly. And with that, this boss is rinse and repeat until you burn him to the ground. Moving on, you will next face the Guardian Sentry. This mob will spawn tornadoes all players are going to have to dodge, and these tornadoes will move around slightly around the platform. This mob will also do a big AoE cast that is displayed as a big giant white swirly on the ground. If you are hit by this, you will take big damage and get knocked back. In order to avoid that damage and knockback, you are going to want to LOS the target by standing behind one of 4 pillars on the platform. As in tank, you can ignore the giant knockback and just use a defensive and get yourself knocked into the pillar as long as your back is up against that pillar. Next up, you're going to fight an army of eagles on the platform that the next boss spawns on. The little eagles, same as the baby lashers, just cleave them down and burn them as quickly as possible. For the alpha eagles though, you're going to want to interrupt Call of the Flock. Failing to do so is going to increase the attack speed of all nearby eagles, which will make those small ones deadly. This alpha eagle will also do Gust, which is a frontal cone that will deal damage and knock players back that are hit, so make sure that you step out of that. Next boss is Crawth, and he is going to have some fun mechanics for you to play with. If you are facing north on the platform, when the boss spawns, you will notice that there is going to be 2 glowy areas for you to stand. The one on the left is air, and the one on the right is fire. And we'll go over exactly what you have to do with those mechanics in a moment. First up, the boss is going to use an ability called Deafening Screech. This is going to deal a large amount of nature damage and be displayed as a small ring around your character. When this ability is done being cast, the damage is going to be inflicted to anyone inside of your ring, so make sure you're not overlapping rings with your party members and taking unnecessary damage. When you are casting an ability, when this ability goes off, you will be silenced, so make sure to stop your cast right before this ability goes off. Next up is for my tanks, and that is Savage Peck. This is going to deal big physical damage and apply a dot that deals damage every second for 10 seconds. So make sure to use a defensive. Overpowering Gust is a frontal cone that will be targeted at a random player. Make sure to not stand in it. Now, during the fight, the boss is going to drop down 3 balls from the sky. To pick up one of the balls, simply walk into it. You'll then want to bring that ball either to the air glowy space or the fire one. You're going to want to throw 3 balls into the same goal by using the extra action ability button on your screen in order to trigger a new phase. By throwing the 3 balls into the fire goal first, you will cause the boss to become stunned for 12 seconds once and increase all damage that is taken by 75%. Typically, people will do the fire goal first, and DPS, you're going to want to save all your cooldowns for when the boss is stunned. After triggering this goal though, the boss will periodically spawn fire swirlies throughout the remainder of the fight that will deal a ton of damage if you're hit by one. Now, activating the air goal is going to make the boss spawn tornadoes all around the platform that are going to be moving that you'll have to dodge. The boss will also blow winds across the platform that are going to push you. In order to become immune to those winds, you are going to want to look for a little air orb with a blue arrow above it and pick that up. By picking up one of these orbs, you will gain immunity to the push and gain a haste and speed boost for 20 seconds. So make sure that you allow people in your party to also pick one up. And similar as the fire goal, when this goes off, this will be a mechanic that you will deal with for the remainder of the fight. Over the course of the fight, you will most likely be activating both goals and dealing with both of these mechanics that are added at the same exact time throughout the rest of the fight, on top of all the mechanics we went on over the first half. After Crawth, you are going to find yourself faced by corrupted mana fiends, and all you're going to want to do is make sure that you interrupt their mana void cast. You will also encounter spellbound battle axe and spellbound scepters. For the battle axe, you're going to want to make sure that you hard CC severing slash. This ability applies a bleed to your tank, and on higher keys, this is going to absolutely melt them because the bleed does indeed stack. For the scepter, you're going to want to make sure that you hard CC Mystic Blast, and if you don't, it's going to do massive AoE damage to your group. You will also come across some unruly textbooks, which I'm sure you all hate after taking this course, that are going to try and give you another lecture on how to do this dungeon, and if you do not interrupt that lecture, it will sleep a target, and the last thing you want is for your tank or healer to be slept, so make sure you kick it. You will also come across arcane foragers and ravagers. The foragers are going to do a little leap and deal damage to targets. The ravager though is going to cast Rift Breath, which is a frontal cone that deals a ton of damage. Make sure that you're not standing in its way. It will also cast Vicious Ambush, where the mob will dash to a target and dealing damage. This is displayed as a ring around your character, and anyone within that ring is going to take damage from this dash. Make sure that you're not standing in the party member's ring and that you're moving away from your party if it is on you. Our third boss is Vexamus. He will cast an ability called Arcane Orbs, where he will shoot out multiple arcane orbs onto the battlefield. These orbs locations are shown as arcane swirlies on the ground and will deal damage if you're hit by them. Once the damage goes off though, those orbs will spawn and start moving towards the boss. You and your party members are going to want to soak at least one orb each. Failing to do so will make the boss deal big damage if he ends up absorbing one. But be aware that this does apply a dot that will increase the damage of the next orb you soak by 200%. If you find yourself in a situation where you need to absorb a second one and you're not the tank, make sure you use a defensive or you will most likely kill yourself. Next up is mana bombs, where the boss is going to mark 3 players, and after 4 seconds dealing damage to them and dropping an arcane pool on the ground that is permanent for the rest of the fight. So make sure that you try and drop these on the outside of the battlefield. For my tanks, you want to be aware of Arcane Expulsion. This is a frontal cone that deals big damage and will be targeted directly at you, so make sure the boss is not facing towards your group when this ability is about to go off. And our last ability for Vexamus is Arcane Fissure. When Vexamus reaches 100 energy, he's going to deal damage to everybody and knock them back. After the knockback, players will spawn 3 arcane swirlies underneath them, so make sure you move out of each of those arcane swirlies and make your way back to the boss. And with all that, it is rinse and repeat until the boss is dead. On your way to the final boss, there are only 3 mobs left that you're going to have to worry about. First up is the Echo Knight. It's our big beefy boy, and he's going to whirlwind on your face, and the only way to stop this whirlwind is with a hard CC. Other than our beefy boy, you will be interacting with the Invoker. The Invoker will cast arcane missiles, which are going to deal a ton of damage to whoever it's targeted to, so make sure you interrupt it. They will also place an astral bomb on a target, which will detonate after 3 seconds, dealing damage to everybody within the ring. So if you have it, make sure you move away from your party members, and if you don't have it, make sure that you step outside of that ring so you don't take unnecessary damage. Lastly, you may find yourself encountering covering a Restorer. They cast Celestial Shield. You're going to want to make sure you interrupt this ability. Failing to do so will place an Absorb Shield on an ally and increase their haste by 50%. Now it's time for the final boss. A major mechanic of this final boss is Overwhelming Power, where every time you're hit by an ability, a debuff will be placed on you. And after 3 stacks of this debuff, you will drop an Arcane Rift on the ground. These Arcane Rifts are massive and deal damage if you stand within them, and also periodically shoot out Arcane Orbs that you're going to have to dodge. Proper Arcane Rift placement is going to be the key to victory on this fight. Now starting off with abilities. First up is Unleash Energy. The boss will do a 2-second cast and deal damage to all players. The boss will typically open up with this ability. Next up is Energy Bomb, where the boss will mark a target, and after 6 seconds they'll explode, dealing big damage and also marking them with another debuff of Overwhelming Power. The boss will also cast Power Vacuum, which will suck everybody in. Players will have to then run out of the ring around the boss to avoid taking big damage. If you are hit by this ability though, you will get a stack of Overwhelming Power. And our last ability from the boss is Astral Breath. The boss will pick a direction and start casting a big old breath, and getting hit by it, of course, is going to deal big damage and apply a stack of Overwhelming Power. As you can see, being targeted or being hit by any ability, even the Arcane Orbs around the room, are going to apply a stack of Overwhelming Power. So avoid being hit by any mechanic that isn't directly targeted at you, so that you can reduce the number of Arcane Rifts that will be dropped throughout the fight. As you can see, it can get a little hectic if there are a ton of Arcane Rifts. And with all of that, class, you now know everything you need to not brick those keys in Algeth'ar Academy in Season 4 of Dragonflight. If you have any questions, tips, tricks, or pointers to share in Algeth'ar Academy, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to check them out and I'd love to answer your questions. I have guides coming out for every single dungeon this season, so make sure that you punch that like button, kiss that subscribe button for me, and tickle my bell so you can stay up to date when all those videos drop. I'll also be posting updates about when you can find me live running Algeth'ar Academy on YouTube, Twitch, and Kick, so make sure to keep an eye out for that on Discord and X. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.